Good evening, everyone. It is 7:31 on the 20th of July. Welcome to a legislative session. We're going to stand to do the pledge and then we will have our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Not seeing the flag, but we'll pretend there's a virtual flag. Our usual
Move too
flag.
quick.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all right. It's gonna be a long night.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Jamie, I think Omar is on the attendance panel. Would you mind bringing him in, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Who just joined the meeting? Frank Norcross, is that also?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm
There's
from
about-
Energy Re.
Yeah, there's about 8 people coming from them.
And
Okay.
they're- Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. All right, folks. Hello, Trustee Lopez. We were all having a little bit of an issue. It's all good because we're doing the upgrades to our computers, upgrades to our systems, Microsoft upgrades. There are always hiccups. It's always a little bit painful as we switch over. And eventually we forget all about it and it's all better. So I know we're all going through like growing pains right now, but it's totally necessary and long overdue. So we're just gonna have to be diligent about it. And if anybody has problems or whatever, please email the manager's office. Do we have anybody in the gallery that we have to just make sure that that's working okay?
We do have people in the gallery. I don't know if the folks, our guests, if they just want to take a look and see if there's anyone over there I need to bring over.
I think we're okay. I
Okay.
don't know who 917 is, but the rest
No.
is okay.
Yeah, I think you're
Okay.
fine. Thank
I
you.
think we're good, fine. I just want to make sure everything's working. Okay, everyone. Hello, good evening. Are there any trustee announcements, folks?
Mayor, we have to do the roll call.
Excuse me, Martha.
Okay, Trustee Lopez? Trustee White? Trustee Quesada?
Present.
Mayor Levin?
Present.
And now mayors and trustees announcements.
Thank you. Love the sunflowers, by the way. Look terrific. All righty. Announcements, anyone? Okie dokie. I just want to say for everyone to be really careful about the heat. The block party that the police department did on Broad Avenue. I think Trustee White was there before me, and then I went there. Honestly, my feet were burning from the concrete. It is so hot out there. So I ask everyone to please keep hydrated, stay in the shade, don't go out in the middle of the day. And I think that the block party was a huge success. The barbecue had a line a mile long and the burgers looked amazing. If only I ate burgers and cheese on top, I would have had at least one. They look great and all the cops were really helping everyone. I think it all worked. I think Feeding Westchester was there. There were games for the kids. So Chief, I think that it was really beautifully done. It's nice to have the block parties. Trustee Fritchie just texted me. He cannot seem to get on. So I don't know if somebody can help him. I don't know why. I don't know what he's trying to do.
Jamie,
but-
he's having the same problem we were, so can you just tell him to go through Zoom and text the meeting?
Yeah,
code?
I did. I'm gonna text him again.
Okay, gotta go through the email. Okay, so that was today's event, which I think is fantastic. The heat wave is continuing through the week. So, Karen, are we doing anything because of the heat wave? Are there any changes that we should let the public know about?
So the rec center is open as a cooling center from 9 to 9 p.m. During the week, and then 9 to 3 p.m. on Sunday. And that'll be until further notice. We also are offering people for a relatively small fee. Jamie, what is it, $5 that even if you're not a member of the community center, that you can use the pool during certain designated times.
To cool off.
Yeah.
Great, appreciate that.
And
It's
it's
very nice.
yeah, so
Yeah,
It is really
it's great that our village does that for its residents and residents' families who are here, etc. So I thank everybody for putting that in place. So I thank you all. Those, I don't have any other announcements. So let's get the meeting going. Martha?
Okay, we have our special presentation on Green Path, New York.
Yes, so tonight we're going to start with a presentation from our friends at Clean Path New York. And just to provide some context, this initiative is led by the New York Power Authority and 2 private sector energy partners. And it proposes to create infrastructure that delivers 7.5 million megawatt hours of emissions-free energy generated in upstate New York with to the New York City area. And in large part, this is to offset what is lost with the Indian Point closure. While the infrastructure will largely be in NYPA's right-of-ways, the system will need to make a landfall in the Croton Peekskill area, and it will need to re-enter the Hudson somewhere near Ossining. So Clean Path has scheduled local public meetings in Ossining for next week and hopes to hear more about environmentally sensitive areas and other locations that should be avoided as the team finalizes this segment of the course. And we've asked Clean Path New York here tonight to give a brief introduction on the project and make formal contact with everybody here so that you are all informed about this project. So, welcome.
So
Clean
welcome
Path.
all. How long is the presentation scheduled for?
They're aware that they only have 10 minutes.
No, I'm asking. I don't know there's so many of you. I don't know who's doing the
So
presentation.
I will let you guys start off and introduce yourselves because there are so many of you. So
Okay, why don't if you could tell me who you all are, how long the presentation is, and if anything that we need to look at, and then whether you want questions at the end or during, that would be, and who's speaking, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, so thank you very much for hosting us, Mayor Levin and the Village Board. We're very excited to connect with you. It's good to see you again, Mayor. My name is Luke Falk. I help to lead the project along with my colleagues who are here with me today. In the spirit of keeping things brief, I think I'll just go through and introduce who's in the presentation gallery alongside me. Gordy Gray, who is the Vice President of Development for Invenergy, is here with us. They're one of the partners advancing the project. Frank Norcross works with me at Energy Re. He's our Vice President of all things technical and leads our engineering effort. And then we have Wendy Frank from NYPA, who helps run community engagement and outreach initiatives in your area and beyond. And we also have Kristen Walsh from our regulatory affairs consultant. She's the president of Tonio Burgos Associates. And so just remind me how long we have and I can calibrate our remarks to that. And if you want to do Q&A throughout, we're comfortable with that. Or if you want to backload them, we're comfortable with that too.
We generally like to have give people 10 minutes if you tell me you need more, because I'm sure you have your presentation all set. That's fine. We just like to know what it is. And I think because there's so many of you, why don't we just do the Q&A at the end, unless one of my colleagues, needs some clarity about something or just wants to chime in with something that's bothersome, etc. Why don't we try to do that? Yeah,
that's great. So I can do the 10-minute version. I still think I'd like to share some slides. Do you think that would be okay?
Yeah, that's what's great about this venue.
All right. Wonderful. So can you see my screen?
A minute ago I could, and then we lost it. So.
Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. Great. So thanks again for having us. Again, my name's Luke Falk. I'm with Energy Re. The project that we're speaking about today is called Clean Path New York. It's always sort of present in our lives with climate change, but I think today is sort of acutely pronounced around the world about just how impactful some of the extreme weather events that we're observing can be. So it doesn't bring me any joy, but I think it's appropriate, especially on the day when President Biden announced his intent to establish a climate emergency. Our project is in response to all of that. And so it's a public-private partnership being advanced by, like I said before, the Power Authority, with whom I'm sure you're all familiar, Invenergy, who is the largest privately held developer of renewable energy in the country, with a long track record of successfully deploying renewables projects in New York, and Energy Re, which is a clean energy development firm headquartered in New York City and Houston. And that's where Frank and I sit. So I'm sure you're all aware of the state's CLCPA. It's a climate law that puts at its center a need to address climate change, primarily by decarbonizing the electric sector. And somebody alluded earlier to the fact that, with Indian Point going offline, the downstate grid mix, which used to be about 70% fossil fuel driven, is now in the 92% fossil fuel driven. And so the state recognized that something needed to be done to deliver renewable energy into the downstate zone, to clean up the grid, because the state wants to be on track to have 70% emissions-free power throughout the state by 2030 and 100% emissions-free power by 2040. And so NYSERDA and the Department of Public Service established a program called the Tier 4 Renewable Energy Credit Program that sought projects that would help to deliver clean energy downstate. And that's where our project comes in. It's a mix of generation and transmission. So we're going to build 3,800 megawatts of new wind and solar generation capacity all throughout the state. All of which is sort of upstate and in Western New York. None of the generation that we're building is in the downstate region. But in order to deliver that power downstate, we're building a 175-mile all underground or underwater transmission line to take that energy where the population is most dense. On the generation side, it's a $7.5 billion build out essentially. And on the transmission side, it's a $3.5 billion project. So collectively, this is an $11 billion clean energy infrastructure program that we think makes it the largest of its kind in the country. Everything that we're doing, all of the generation and the transmission, is being built in the state of New York, and therefore we're creating 8,300 jobs through the development and operations of the program. All of those jobs are located within the state. And when we bring, it's really a tremendous amount of renewable energy that we're talking about. When you bring all of that online and deliver it down into the downstate zone, it has cascading ripple effects across the whole state's electric sector, where we see a 22% reduction in the amount of fossil fuel fired generation all across the state on average every year. NYSERDA thinks that this will avoid 49 million tons of carbon emissions by 2040, when they anticipate that the grid will be 100% clean. That's roughly equivalent to taking 9 million cars off the road. And when we do that, and all of those fossil fuel fired power plants don't have to run as much, or they can turn off, we avoid billions of dollars of emissions, which avoid billions of dollars of social and public health costs in the process. And this is especially important to our frontline communities who have for too long borne the burden of these fossil fuel assets being sited in their communities. So that's sort of the top line of the project. In the essence of time, I think I'll just summarize the rest. There's quite a lot to this program, given what we're trying to do. But in terms of a timeline to orient you into where we are in its development process, there was the state issued a solicitation seeking projects in January of last year. We responded to it in May. We were fortunate enough to be designated by the governor during Climate Week in September of last year, after which time we developed a contract with NYSERDA, which we executed in November. And then in December, that was referred to the Public Service Commission for its review and approval. And after, a 6-week comment period with an additional rebuttal period, we were ultimately approved by the Public Service Commission on April 14th of this year. And so now what we're doing is putting together the application for the permit for the transmission line. And the way that that is done in New York State is through a process called Article 7, which is sort of an omnibus one-stop shop for permitting large transmission facilities. It's governed by the Public Service Commission and helped administered by the Department of Public Service. And that process includes, a rigorous environmental review and assessment, an investigation of community and neighborhood impacts, and asks us to study a set of alternatives around where the transmission line could be located, and asks us to balance all of the competing equities to determine what would be the most optimal from all perspectives. And that's what we're in the middle of doing now. And so as part of this process, there's a robust community engagement and stakeholder engagement effort. The Public Service Commission, encouraged us to participate in an open house program in advance of us submitting our application. We think we're going to submit our application in October. And we think that the process of going through this permitting process takes approximately 18 months to 2 years. And so we plan to conclude it in 2024. And at that point, begin construction. And we believe that it's a 3-year construction cycle. And because it's 175 miles, it's not as though there will be construction throughout that entire geography for all 3 years, but there will be activity at various points along the way for various times along the way. So before we file our application in October, we're conducting a series of open houses. And one that I think will be top of mind for Ossining is next week on the 26th. We have 2 sessions held at the Ossining Public Library, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, evening, so that anybody who wants to, depending on the constraints of their schedule, can probably find the time to come out. If somebody can't be directly in attendance on their own, there is a virtual space on our website where people can go and at their own pace engage with any of the materials that we've developed. Those materials exist in Spanish and in Greek. The open house will be a team of us in front of poster boards, so that participants can come and engage with whatever element of the project they want, and there will be an expert on hand to field any questions. We're going to keep in touch with everybody so that they're understanding how the project evolves over time. This is just the first of many, engagements with the community. It's important to note that even though we're doing this in advance of the submission of our application, we're going to be back often. We want to hear your feedback and we want to answer your questions. So far, I think we've had a really productive dialogue with Mayor Levin and the team at the town and village. And so we're excited to continue that. I think I'll just park it there. You know, I would encourage everybody to follow us on social media. We have a Twitter account. You can do @CleanPathNY. We're on Instagram at the same handle @CleanPathNY. You know, in a more fulsome presentation, I talk about our commitment to entering into a PLA with our friends in the union world to ensure that all the jobs we're enabling are good paying with good benefits. I talk about the $270 million community investment fund that we're establishing to focus on workforce development, education, expansion of access to healthcare and frontline communities and others, and environmental stewardship in the form of park recreation and expanded park access. But there's too much to cover, so I'm just going to leave it there and open it up for questions. And we really appreciate, again, having the opportunity to speak with you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that there are many questions, so let's bring us all back together.
I have one.
Please, Dana.
So explain, portion of this will be, when you say underwater, under the Hudson, it's got to come out near Ossining. I'm just trying to get a picture of the route of this thing and how it affects us.
Yeah, that is a completely understandable question. So thank you for asking it. Yeah, let me take it from the top. We begin the transmission line in Delhi, New York, in the Western Catskills. There's a substation owned by NYSEG where we're going to plug the top of the wire into the system to collect all the renewable energy that we're generating across the state.
I'm sorry, look, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Do you happen to have a map of what, or a diagram maybe that you can share on the screen if possible? So we can actually visualize this a little bit better as you talked or
Sure.
described it. That'll be helpful, please. Thank you.
Sure, here you go. All right, so this is sort of this is like the broad view map that shows the indicative geography, and then I can show you what we will be displaying at the open house next week, which focuses in on the Westchester area more specifically. But just to take it from the top, we start in Delhi, New York, and for the first 100 miles or so, NYPA owns an existing transmission corridor called the Marcy South Corridor that already hosts overhead transmission wires. We're going to bury our wire underground in that transmission corridor. We think that it's smart to bury this underground for several reasons, but mostly because it's more resilient to extreme weather events that are going to be more frequent over time, and it just makes the electric system hardened against it. So we're going to be underground until we get into Orange County at an area called Rock Tavern near Middletown, at which point we're going to leave NYPA's corridor. And for the rest of the route, we're either in a street or a road of some kind, buried either in the median or on the shoulder of a roadway, or we're under a riverbed. And the way that we do that is we head east on I-84 to the Hudson River, where we make waterfall in the Hudson. And we're in the riverbed of the Hudson, heading south from around Newburgh to around Buchanan, Peekskill area. At that point, we need to get out of the river because there's an ecologically sensitive area of the river called Havistraw Bay. And to the south of that, there, as you know, there's Croton Bay. And so for that section of the river, we can't be in the river. And so we need to be on land somewhere. And therefore, we are going to be studying how we get in and out of Westchester. To give you a sense of why we're contending with this, north of Peekskill is just topographically very difficult to deal with, and south of Verplank, you can't be there because of Havistraw Bay. So you need to get out of the water and into Westchester, which we're studying several different alternatives of how to accomplish. Then we're going to come over to Route 9 and come down. And then we've been speaking with lots of people in the area about how to best make our way back into the Hudson. And we're studying a broad swath of area where we have several different routing alternatives under review. And what we'd like to do is work collaboratively with the communities to understand what the least impactful and most advantageous route would be for everyone. And from there, we get out of the Hudson, we get out of Westchester, we're back into the Hudson, heading south to the Harlem River. We head east through the Harlem, and then ultimately make our way into Queens, where we interconnect to Con Ed's network at a place called the Rainey Substation, which is on the East River next to a power plant called Ravenswood. So there's nothing in Westchester with respect to our project other than an underground buried set of transmission wires. And to give you a sense of the size, each of the wires is about the size of a bagel. It's like 5 inches. They're going to be contained in a concrete box called a duct bank, which is roughly 3 feet by 5 feet. And that will typically be buried 5 feet underground. And so I know that there are a lot of communities in the area who have dealt with, gas pipelines and 42-inch mains. Those take up a lot more space. They've got a lot more clearance requirement. They're a little bit more volatile than our line, which is has no moving parts. So I think it's a very manageable path to execution. The thing that we are committed to trying to figure out is how do we do it in a way that presents the least disruption during the construction period for everybody. Does that address
So
some
you'd
of
be
the
coming down Route 9 at some point. Do you foresee going through Ossining or being back in the river before that?
So we're studying several different alternatives around how to do that. To be candid, my preference would be not to have to come through the community of Ossining.
Yeah, that would be good.
I've got a couple questions. So the transmission lines, they're going to be AC or DC?
It is high voltage direct current, so it's DC.
High voltage direct current. And what is your time frame on this? Do you have a time frame if you started or you're still in the design process?
Yeah, so we are currently in design. We expect to file for our permit in the fall. We think it's going to take a couple of years to get permitted. So we think that construction can begin sometime in 2024. And we think that construction will conclude in late 2027. But it's important to note that that would not mean that there is a continuous construction cycle on all 175 miles. That would be staged over the course of a 3-year period.
So you're going to do it in sections then?
Yeah, essentially, I mean, we're going to parallel path some of it, but the point is it's not as though every mile is going to have 3 years of construction on it.
Is there a reason why you chose DC instead of AC?
Yeah, 100%. Frank, do you want to give the HVDC answer?
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk with you. So the rationale for using high voltage direct current is that number one, it experiences less losses over long transmission. So that means more of our power will be able to inject into New York City. And then second, because of the conversion from AC to DC and then back again, we have a controllable line. And what that means is that we can sort of control the output of the line. And that's important so that it's a reliable resource when it lands in New York City. Also offers benefits like the ability to provide black start services. If you had outages in New York City, we could always bring power to sort of black start the city and bring it back to life. So that's a great question, but that's why.
Yeah, so I'm going to presume that you're going to have substations or switch stations all along this somewhere at some point, correct?
Not all, you're correct, but not all along the route. There will be basically a connection in the north to a 345 kV AC substation. We run AC to the converter, convert to DC, and then it's just the cable run all the way down to Astoria. At the Astoria complex, we reconvert from DC back to AC and then run AC until we tie back into the grid near Ravenswood.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big benefits of HVDC is that in between the 175 miles, like in between the two ends of the line, there are no substations or any other facilities. It's just a set of conductors.
No checkoffs or checkpoints as far as if you have a fault somewhere?
No, I mean, there's a series of splice chambers, but the whole thing will have, sensors and fiber in it to alert us to the extent a fault occurs, where that fault is located. And then there would be a manhole where somebody could access an individual length of cable if it needed to be accessed.
Yeah, because I know you more than understand DC. There's a fault, you're gonna know it. So the DC burns, so there's nothing left.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I will go. Good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I think this is great, moving in the right direction. First, my question is about communication. Once you get permitted and construction starts, if folks in the community have questions, to whom will we redirect those questions?
I'm
Omar,
sorry,
you're breaking up a bit. So did you guys hear the question?
I couldn't hear.
The question is, to whom would we direct questions once construction starts?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great question. So we have a website, cleanpathny.com. We have a phone line that we've already established. So anybody who has a question or concern and wants to call us can call the number. There's also an inbox where we have like info@cleanpathny.com. We check both of those things every day. You can message us through social media, whether it's Twitter or Instagram. We have active account management on both of those channels. And, we will also, typically, if those are like the main channels, but we will be responsive and make ourselves available. It's not like you're going to get sent to a black box. Like it'll be one of us probably on this call who actually winds up making contact with whoever's inquiring about whatever.
Thank you. One of the challenges that we find, particularly with our partners at Con Edison, is that the roads that go through Austin, some of them are village streets and roads, some of them are state, and it's difficult for us to get information about what's happening on state roads. Can you tell us a little bit about to what extent the fact that a road is state versus village, or what kind of impacts how you work on it?
If I may, because you're breaking up, Omar. So let me see if I could I think this is what you're asking. We're having a lot of issues with Con Ed and how they take roads apart and then put them back together. Not always in the ideal scenario for a variety of reasons. Good intentions, but not such good execution, no secret. I think what Trustee Lopez is asking, what is your coordinating point, if I may, on how you're coordinating with Con Ed in the work that they simultaneously do? One, and I think he's also saying, like, what's the coordination, and then who does one speak to, like when there are problems? Because now you're not just talking about a bunch of you guys who all represent different companies, but there's this big company called Con Ed on Route 9 specifically. I think was what Trustee Lopez was speaking about.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that there's probably all right, Gordy or Frank, which one of you would like to take this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to field it. So I think, you're certainly we're all well aware of the challenges of dealing with Con Edison sometimes. I think what I would say is that, you know, this is we're coming to you now. We're going to be coming to you through Article 7, and we will be coordinating with you, you know, through the conduct of construction. So it's not like we're going to disappear and then start building the line out there in 2024, 2025 period. I would say that, you know, we're committed to having a pretty open and robust communication with the city and the town about how we coordinate construction. We will certainly be coordinating with Con Edison and other utilities to make sure that we're doing this in the least impactful way, and that we're trying to coordinate with, you know, minimizing opening roads as much as possible. But during construction, you know, we're not sort of disappearing and doing the work. We'll always be available for you guys to reach out to if there are concerns about our impact on the local community.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the broad strokes planning answer is that, you know, we're going to do, you know, a deep dive on existing utility assessments that will need to include information that we gather from various municipalities. We're going to need to coordinate access with DOT and their regional offices. And then, you know, I think the rules of engagement with Con Ed and others, exactly the points of contact and how that gets executed is sort of still TBD given the early nature of the project. But I take your point, and I think it's a good call out. And, you know, we're going to have to be extraordinarily communicative and proactive with everybody that has an interest in infrastructure in and around the areas where we're going to be located.
Thank you.
And I would just add to the Article 7 process, you know, it is a permitting process, but it results in a certificate. It has conditions that live on. Those conditions include requirements about how to respond to any questions or concerns that come up during the construction process or afterward. And so, you know, because this is a large transmission infrastructure that's subject to those rules, you know, there's an additional sort of process through which we will continue to be available as the project, and then also the state will help to oversee that and make sure that is also done.
So if one of the purposes of this meeting is to get feedback, it would make a lot of sense for me that you take the feedback seriously based on our experiences. And all of what you just said is what Con Ed tells us all the time. I mean, literally the same words. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm going to play the role that I have to, which is protect my constituents of Ossining. What Trustee Lopez is bringing up isn't just a simple process question. We already knew the answer to that. It is that somebody better be in charge of coordination here, and it can't be the village staff. It's really your responsibility, and all of you who are planning this, to make sure that there is communication that's two-way, and when something goes wrong, what you're going to be doing about it and how people deal with it. Because we've been dealing with it regarding Route 9 for a number of years now with exactly that commentary, which feels disingenuous after the 5th year. It just does. I don't mean, and it's not yours. You've never said it to us, but I am enlightening to you as to what the population in this community has been going through. And we're not the only ones, right? We're not the only community that has had roads ripped up and ripped down and sideways and all that. But if you're genuinely interested in community engagement, especially from the members of the board who represent the public, this piece isn't a nothing. It's really, really important because you are stepping into shoes that we have had negative impact. This has become the conversation that is bigger than taxation. And when you get to be the highest tax communities in the United States, and this becomes the conversation, then government has to actually listen. You're actually, in this case, representing the government in some way, because you are getting your funding from the government. And that's what people care about. They'd like to have their cars available to them so they can go to work. So that's, I think, why Trustee Lopez brought this up as a very important point. And I think it will come back to bite you if it is not addressed beyond, we will listen to you. There really has to be a process that's workable, that's understandable, that's used, and there's a feedback loop to fixing things. That's, I think, has been missing. I mean, I am really excited about environmental programs. I am a big fan of a project like this. I've seen it in other parts of the world, but the pipeline of 175 miles, communities that this is going through have to share their concerns. It isn't a question of whether this is a good idea or bad idea. That's not actually the issue at this point. For me, I mean, I'm just speaking for me. Did everybody, who else? Manny, did you have?
No,
I'm
not yet.
speaking only for Trustee Lopez because I know it's hard to hear him, that's all. Manny?
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, I just want to kind of a little bit more like piggyback on what, the mayor just mentioned and Trustee Lopez also just mentioned. Look, I've been complaining about Con Ed and their work for, I don't even know how many years now. There's these sidewalks that are broken because they replace one of the light poles and they never fix the sidewalk. There's still a hole in there. There's still poles. It's just not the roads. It's just the infrastructure itself of them. And how do they fix that? So I'm gonna, like the mayor said, it has to be a plan in place. And how do you guys deal with that? And how do we go about it now? So let me ask you a question. So you show a map and you pretty much said you obviously will prefer to go through the river, to go through the Hudson River to avoid this kind of situations. Obviously, you going through roads, going through villages, towns, and in your communities. When would you have a better understanding in how you're going to deal with from Buchanan to Austining area? When will that be in place? Because right now you said you guys are studying the lines and how does that work? When will that be? Where would you have a little bit more understanding and idea, or at least an option and how to deal with that situation?
Yeah, so first let me say, I really genuinely appreciate the call out and the feedback from Mr. Lopez and the mayor and yourself. We take it very seriously. I hear you. It's not just like going to be a pro forma administrative task. I think that when we mobilize construction in a given jurisdiction, like we're committed to being good partners and being in contact so that everybody understands when work is happening, what people need to be aware of. We will be responsive to the extent that something happens. We're committed to being good partners throughout the process. In terms of, and I mean that, in terms of the, I do, I really do. Like we've all been on, I just think it's like the best way to approach the project, and you need to take it seriously because we've all done large, complicated projects before. And I think that the way to be successful with communities is to commit to, trying to be communicative and collaborative, and to understand the drivers of what's motivating the community members, and then, to try to commit to, wherever there does need to be an impact, to leaving it, just the same as, or better as when you found it. And anyway, so in terms of the timing, we are in the middle of developing the route, and we think that we are going to file our application in October. And with that application, we're going to have to put forth a routing that we think is what is most optimal. Part of the Article 7 process is a discussion which community members can participate in. I think it's important to make this point directly. The Public Service Commission's Article 7 process, affords municipalities with any adjacency to the line to intervene and have their perspective be heard and understood. And they really mean it. So in our project, we're posting a fund of $450,000 to fund that engagement, where communities can access that funding to support an intervention in the proceeding. So all of which is to say, I think we will have a more granular understanding and a better defined route when we apply in October. What we're doing now is not only this level of community engagement and the open houses, but for the past, 18 months, we've been having hundreds of meetings all along the line with various sets of stakeholders and community-based organizations and nonprofits and elected officials to better understand their feedback. That work continues in Westchester with several different counterparties, and all of whom are informing what our understanding would be about the best solution. Now, the only thing that I wanted to highlight is that if we could be in the river and just completely bypass Westchester, that would be an interesting thing to think about and study. I don't believe that that is the case. I think that the Department of Environmental Conservation is going to take a pretty adamant position that we cannot be in Haverstraw or Croton Bay, which is why we are studying all of the various alternatives in Westchester. But I do think that there are alternatives where we can simultaneously be on land and avoiding the Haverstraw and Croton Bay, while also trying to avoid oceaning. And, until it's further defined and better understood, I would want to stop short of giving you the mile by mile explanation, because it's in flux and is going to change. But I'm confident that we can get there.
Great, thank you. I just have two more questions. I'm sorry. So one real quick one, I guess. When you said it was documentation in Spanish and Greek, may I ask you why, Greek itself? Why not any other language? Why just Spanish and Greek?
So our VP of External Affairs is actually in the gallery, but I believe that the answer is that what we did was we looked at languages spoken by community members, and if there were speakers, like a certain portion of the population spoke the language, we would translate into that language. And in Astoria, Queens, there's a huge Greek population. And so all of our materials are in Greek. And for the balance of the line, the only alternative language that conformed to the standard that we were using was Spanish.
Thank you for that.
What else, Manny?
And just, if they do have to go through any parts of the village that the village owns, I guess, in a way, I guess, do we have to do anything on our end? I guess that's sort of like a question maybe for you and maybe Stuart. I don't know. If they had to, I know Route 9 does not belong to us. Sure, we know that. So that's the state. But if they have to go through a different route that the state does not own, and they have to go through our municipality, what does that mean for us in that area?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking Luke and maybe Stuart as well. I don't know.
So I think Gordy would be best to field that.
Okay.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, if for example, if in roads, if the routing is in a road owned by the village, we would need to work with the village and enter into an agreement. And I think it would address, some of the concerns that were raised earlier, where, we would be legally bound to provide, ensure that the road is left in a better condition than we found it, and would provide for surveys of existing conditions and before and after. So we would in that instance work with the town on an agreement to make sure that all those conditions are spelled out, and that we would perform.
Okay,
Thank you.
any other questions? So I have a few, I don't know if I need the answers. You're asking for input. So these are some thoughts that I have. You can ask them if you have it. And then just some thoughts for you guys to think about, since you said you're in early stages, and just some clarity on definitions. Sorry, just dropped my notes. Okay. So you kept talking about frontline communities. What are frontline communities and how many are there?
Yeah, that's a good and fair question. So this is sort of a process story at the moment. The CLCPA terms these communities disadvantaged communities. Now, in our hundreds of meetings with local stakeholders, we've learned that not every community enjoys being termed disadvantaged, but that's the term of art in the law. We prefer frontline communities, and we just use them synonymously. The legal definition is, I think, in process. So the advisory board working on the CLCPA has promulgated areas that they perceive to be disadvantaged, and they draw boundaries around them. I think some of the definition comes from demographic information. Others includes information stemming from DEC analysis in 2019 about potential environmental justice areas. And I think those two data sources are commingled to arrive at a definition of disadvantaged under the law, and that those communities are under review by the board, but have not yet been finalized. When we looked at submitting our response to the RFP, we used both sources of information and made our best determination about where we thought those communities would ultimately land. But I think that, as you're aware, there are areas in Ossining that are potential environmental justice areas and would probably be treated as such under the law and, with respect to our initiatives and our project.
So Stuart, it would be helpful for me to understand the ramifications of what all that means to Ossining. Like
Certainly,
from a
Mayor.
legal perspective, what our rights are from a local law point of view versus the state. So thank you for that. That is not at all what I thought you were going to say. So you don't have a number because you're still defining, it sounds like to me. Or refine, I shouldn't say define, I should say refining.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
Okay.
state is codifying its guidance.
Mayor, I believe there are 5 census tracts in Ossining that would be qualified
Okay.
as disadvantaged.
Great. So thank you. It's a 175 mile pipeline. How many municipalities is it going through?
Kristen, do you know the answer to that, like off the top of your head?
I think it's about 48 if you include,
Yeah, that's close to it.
Yep.
Does that include Queens? Like all the way from beginning point to end point? Queens, I think, is also considered, right?
Yes.
Okay. So it was curious to me that getting to Queens, you would go through the Hudson Valley when Queens actually sits on the other side of Westchester. It sits more on the sound side, right? I mean, it's actually not on the Hudson River. The Bronx is on the Hudson River, but Queens is not. And yet the line from Western New York, instead of crossing over, I'm not an engineer and I'm not looking, it just seemed odd to me when I first heard about it. And as I thought about it, why it's going through the Hudson Valley communities, which are frankly so old. I mean, infrastructure, many of them are over 200 years rather than, is it because of the Hudson River? Because the sound doesn't work? I mean, what is the reason you're going down this path?
Well, there's, I mean, there's only so many ways to get from here to there. And when you look at all of the different ways that you can do it, it's sort of like a difficult puzzle that balances all of the, different community impacts and environmental impacts.
Okay.
And in order to get from the Western Catskills down, NYPA is uniquely advantaged to be able to have an existing transmission corridor. Nobody in the state of New York wants to do greenfield development for transmission anymore. So our project, other than the Hudson riverbed, uses entirely existing rights of way.
Got it.
And so that, like, the reason why we have to get over to Queens by the time we get into New York City, this might be the counterintuitive part. Like, there are places to interconnect to Con Ed's network, like up in northern Manhattan or in the Bronx. The reason why we're going all the way over to Queens is because of the configuration of the electric grid. The closer you get to the heart of Con Ed's network, the more impact you have of supplanting fossil fuel fired electric generation. And so basically you need to get as close as you can to like Ravenswood. And so if you're going to be investing all of the time and effort to bring transmission down into the city, what you want to do is go as deep into Con Ed's network as you possibly can, which is what compels us to need to go to Queens.
Okay. So that's fair. I would just tell you that one of the things you might want to consider that may come up is that the Hudson Valley part of Westchester, the waterfront is dominated by lower income African American and people of color communities, almost all the way down Poughkeepsie. I mean, you could actually look through it. The more affluent community that's more homogeneous actually sits on the other side of Westchester. So I found it odd that all of this work is being done in one sector of our community again versus the other. Having said that, I understand from an engineering point of view, as you explained it to me, but I do think some thought has to be given to where things are being torn up again versus where they're not being torn up, which is in the more affluent, homogeneous Westchester zip codes on the other side of Westchester. And I think it's something you should think about. I'm not sure if nonprofits always think about it, but I do. And I immediately looked at that. So it's something, especially the waterfronts and how those have developed, and especially in Austin, because I don't run the Hudson Valley, I just look at my own community. So I don't expect an answer, but as I said, I'd like to bring some thought simply to put it in front of you, for you guys to sort of wrestle with and think about, because you guys get paid the big bucks, not me. So I do think you need to just think through that and make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
No, I mean, I appreciate that feedback. I mean, one thing that I can say is that, you know, we did study several alternatives that would take us more easterly. And then when you wind up coming down, you know, you face another set of similar feedback from the borough of the Bronx, where, you know, the implication is if you came east across Westchester, you wind up going through a huge swath of the Bronx. The Bronx also feels that they've borne a disproportionate share of infrastructure projects in support of.
So not to argue with you, but the beneficiary of all of this is the world. But the real beneficiary of this are two parties. One, the people who will be employed in Western New York and get some electrical value. And two, the people in the city of New York. As long as the Bronx is part of the city of New York, I'm sorry, I get it, but it doesn't really sit with me because the city of New York is the beneficiary of all of this. We are simply the venue that you have to get from point A to point B. Westchester, from what I'm hearing, doesn't really benefit in any material way. The world does. Lower emissions, all good stuff, all great stuff. I'm not arguing for one moment, and I've already expressed that. But the actual beneficiary is the city of New York, and it is the city of New York that should worry about this, not expect the people of Westchester or Austin to really worry about it. And unless the Bronx secedes, which I know they've thought about in the past, unfortunately, it is their city that benefits. 250 million was the number you quoted for something, some sort of a fund. I wrote too quickly, can't read my handwriting. What's 250 million?
Yeah, so it's $270 million.
Yeah, can't read my handwriting. 270, sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so we've committed to establishing a community investment fund of $270 million, which is going to be focused on, 4 broad ideas. One around workforce development and a just transition to the new clean energy economy. So think things like local hiring practices, apprenticeship programs, continuing ed programs, and the like, to connect local residents to our project and project like ours in the future, which we think will be more and more common. Then an initiative around education, so climate justice, energy literacy, everything that we think the next generation needs to know to be productive participants in where the world is headed. Another initiative around expanding access to healthcare in frontline communities, recognizing the fact that they have shouldered a disproportionate burden of the fossil fuel economy. And then one around environmental stewardship, which, given the broad geography of the project, will look different depending on where the intervention is being made. But think park rehabilitation, expanded recreation opportunities, and even in some more urban areas along the route, there's an initiative broadly in the state and federal level to encourage the electrification of affordable housing, for example, who typically have heating systems that run on oil and gas and are point sources of emissions in their own right. If you retrofit them to be electric, you reduce emissions in communities, you create a reinvestment opportunity for disadvantaged communities, which has its own workforce development component to it as well. And so we think that this is going to be governed by a board of directors that is comprised of project participants like ourselves, and then local community members and stakeholders who are not us, who can help us understand what sorts of initiatives should be funded, to what degree, and how we should measure the success of those engagements over time. And so very open-minded, and would love to talk more about it. I think that there are several opportunities in your area for us to do some really meaningful collaboration together. Now, that's not the only set of benefits, I think, that the project can confer to the Westchester area, but I do think that it is an extraordinarily tangible set of benefits that could emerge from that engagement. I think it's important to underscore that we're committed to local hiring. We're committed to delivering incremental economic investment to the state through this project. And I don't know that that's going to ameliorate your concerns about flyover country and a transmission project. I completely hear your feedback on that. One thing I will note, though, is that in terms of the benefits to the electric system, long story short, by remediating the congestion on the existing grid, there will be an opportunity for more renewable energy to flow into your community. Do I think that that's going to be a tangible enough benefit to ameliorate your concerns? No, but I think it's meaningful and real. Right.
So I actually have been looking at electrifying buildings, because from what I understand, in New York City, it's about 65% of the emissions are actually from buildings, not cars, etc. And then suburbs of New York, as major metropolitan areas, it's about 35%. It's a big number, actually. I don't think it's just lower income areas. I think it's just buildings, all buildings, regardless. And the more electrifying that we do of all communities, might start in Ossining, who knows, would be great. So I like the project, what it does to infrastructure, and with the DRI, Karen, we were going to have to figure out. I mean, Route 9 is part of the DRI, which is also a state project, also scheduled at the same time. I mean, we have all these projects at the waterfront that we've got such huge investments in. So that'll have to be, and I think you guys know that. So this is just a huge coordination effort, but these projects are large. So I'm happy it's happening. I just am concerned about infrastructure and what that does. It just didn't seem like $270,000 was very much to me on a $75 billion project where so many of the jobs are actually not going to be here. They're going to be at the beginning point and end points. So, you know, I'm just putting it out there that that number probably should be, if it were me, I would be revisiting that number, or at least once you figure out what it is you really want to do, like actually do, like actual projects and what they may cost and who may partner with. Maybe it's a lot of money. Maybe it isn't, but it's something to think about, because these are the kind of things the communities care about. It's how's the infrastructure going to be restructured better than it was before, because the inconvenience to our residents is going to be significant and they're going to remember it for a long time. So these are all, I appreciate all of the questions, the answers, your thoughtfulness. I look forward to the meeting at the library. Not sure if that many people know about it. I posted it today, but I don't know how many people are going to come, but whoever comes, that'll be great. And then you have an online version. We'll try to push that out. Karen, is there anything else that we need to think about? I know Maddie's been working on this and she's not here, which I spoke to her before the meeting, but any macro issues, because it's after 8:30, it's 8:37. Is there any macro issues that we should be thinking about as we talk to members of our community?
At this point, I think we've covered it all. Definitely we'll make sure that we can get the word out about next week's meeting, and we look forward to more discussions, and you know, I'm sure you'll hear a lot more from members of our community. So it'll be good to inform the project as we go forward. But kudos to ways to solve our energy crisis.
No, that's good.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mayor, just before we part company here, so I think you
I'm
might have
sorry.
sorry, I think you might have misspoken there towards the end. The community
sorry.
benefit fund is $270 million
What
on a
did I
budget
say?
of $270,000. I just wanted to make sure that
Oh, excuse me.
you were
Yeah,
aware.
I
That's
don't
all.
even think in thousands, having understood now what things cost.
No,
Okay,
Sorry
just
about
want to make
that.
sure.
Thank you for correcting me.
No,
Yes, thank you.
we really appreciate your time. I mean, thank you. We're going to be back. I'm sure we'll be in close communication with everybody for a long time. And so thank you for this opportunity tonight.
Yeah, this is a big project. So big thoughts, big ideas, big change. That's the good stuff. Our job is to look local. We're all doing our job. So I appreciate it. Anybody? We're good?
You know, one thing that I did, I'd be remiss, like this is the type of thing that keeps me up at night. One thing that I did want to mention is that out of all of the air quality benefits that we're delivering, they don't just accrue to New York City. So
I said that. I understand.
Right. So 10% of all of the emissions reductions actually benefit the Hudson Valley. So
honestly, it's even bigger than that. If you guys, not if, but when you succeed with this, however it plays itself out, I'm hoping other states continue in that mode. I hope it goes to all the northeastern states that have the similar infrastructure issues that we do here in New York. So I hope this leads to bigger and better projects. That my role, however, is really to think about the folks here. You know, when New York City succeeds, so do the suburbs. But I'm not the mayor of New York City, so I focus on the topic at hand.
Totally understood, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Okay, it's not the end of our conversations. There'll be plenty more. The meeting, just to be clear, is the Tuesday, right?
It is the
There's 10:30. I'm sorry, a Tuesday at 10:30, and then there's one at 4 to 6. Same place in the library, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
they are both in the library, and I believe that it's 10:30 to 12:30 and 4 to 6.
Correct. Okay.
Awesome.
Terrific. Thank you all. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you.
good night.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, Martha, what do we got?
Administrative reports, Village Manager Karen DeTore.
Thank you. So on the heels of that presentation about renewable energy and electrifying New York, we had big news this week because on Monday, the mayor and Maddie Sahach participated in a presentation to NYSERDA along with our project mover team who, as you know, have been working for months now to figure out a way to get e-bikes into the hands of all village residents who want them. This will help address parking. It will help address energy concerns. It'll make our community maybe easier for some people to get around who like to ride bikes and don't want to use cars. So we're really excited about this project. The presentation went really well. I want to really thank Maddie Zahach and Jamie Hoffman for the tremendous amount of work that they've done on this project, and everybody else in the village who's supported this. It's another big initiative. It's a $7 million grant, and it'll provide the infrastructure to make sure that we have alternative modalities of transportation, and we really are working towards being the greenest village in the country. So kudos to everybody. We'll know we'll know probably in August, and then we officially announced in September. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed. But thank you to everyone who did a fabulous job. And the other thing that I just want to touch on again, because I have the specific hours, the community center is open as a cooling station from now until further notice. So from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday, and 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday. And the pool will be open from 7 a.m. to 8:45 p.m. Monday through Friday. On Saturday, it will be open from 12 p.m. to 5:45, and on Sunday from noon to 2:45 p.m. If you're not a member of the community center, you can still use the pool. You can go there as a cooling center for free, and you do not have to be a member. If you'd like to be go use the pool and you're not a member, you can pay $5 per person, and you'll be able to use the pool during those hours. And the town has extended the hours for the spray park as well. So through this Sunday, the spray park will be operating from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I know that we have a long meeting ahead of us, so that sums up my comments for tonight.
Great, thank you. I'll just say ditto for all the work that was done. It's a big project, but we'll see what happens. We'll celebrate when we're competing against good communities for the e-bike. So, you know, whoever gets it deserves it. It's all good, but let's hope it's us. Okay, so Martha.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
Thank you, Martha. Good evening, folks. There's a planning board meeting this Tuesday, July the 26th. It is a busy agenda. There are no planning board or zoning board meetings or any land use board meetings actually in the month of August. So if folks are interested in what's on this Tuesday's agenda, it is obviously online. All the documents are there, and they can participate via Zoom. Tonight's agenda has various tax certiorari approval resolutions, which the board has calling for a public hearing with regard to proposed local law 9 on vehicle and traffic in terms of public municipal parking and railroad parking, which was discussed last week. And there is a resolution, which we'll get to a little later, that was requested by Village Clerk Donnelly, which is actually Resolution K, dealing with the preservation of electronic records as a preference for paper records, and the process to be handled there. That follows the state regulations. And finally, the last resolution, which is something we also discussed last week, relates to the approval of the village's support for a payment in lieu of tax agreement for the property at 30 Water Street. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Okay,
Martha?
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. As was mentioned before, tonight we hosted the return of our block parties. So we did that in partnership with the Austin School District, featuring Feeding Westchester, Meals on Main. We had a circus with acrobats. My Brother's Keeper program, the Austin Teachers Association, the Austin Public Library, the police department, obviously cooking food, and Open Door. Our next block party is scheduled for August 29th, likely in the same location, though we have not confirmed that yet. We'll figure that out. well attended with lots of people and tremendous amount of resources delivered to the community. So great work by all of our newest cops who came and staffed that block party today. Our real newest cops, five of our newest hires that we swore in last week have now started the police academy, and today are on their third day. One additional one who's a transfer has begun field training and is with us now. Today, we completed a site visit for the New York State Department of Criminal Justice Services Accreditation Council. They came down to check and make sure that we are in compliance halfway through our accreditation cycle. So that was completed successfully today. First week of September, we just got approved. Detective Chavez and I will be presenting at the New York State DCJS Public Safety Symposium on community outreach communications, particularly in the dual language realm that we sort of specialize in here. And this weekend, myself, Lieutenant Donahue, Lieutenant Zimmerman will be attending the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police Conference in Glens Falls, where I'll be sworn in as president of New York State Chiefs. That's all.
Yeah, congratulations. That's happening when?
I'll be sworn in Monday night.
Oh, that's great.
That's all for me. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anybody here who would like to make an organizational announcement? If so, please raise your virtual hand. Seeing no one, is there anybody here from the public who would like to address the board on any of the resolutions on the agenda? If so, please raise your virtual hand. Okay. Moving on to village board resolutions. Approval of voucher detail July 20th, 2022. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby approves the voucher detail report dated July 20th, 2022 in the amount of $708,604.22. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Finance budget modification of fiscal year 2022, budget adjustment, fuel and heat accounts. Resolved the 2022 general water and sewer fund budgets are modified to increase various appropriation accounts and to appropriate excess revenues for unanticipated expenditures for fuel and heat projected to the end of the year as summarized by the village treasurer. And whereas total estimated costs for the expenditure accounts are under budget requiring adjustments, now therefore be it resolved, expenditure and revenue account budgets are adjusted as follows. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. DPW authorization to advertise for bids, contract DPW 22-03 intersection improvements on Main and Spring Streets. Resolved that subject to review by Corporation Counsel, the village clerk is authorized to advertise for bids for contract DPW 22-03 intersection improvements on Main and Spring Streets, such bids are returnable to the village clerk. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Karen, is that the 5 corners or is it just that particular? I've sort of missed it.
I'm sorry.
What
No,
was
for
it
the, I'm sorry.
That's
for-
okay.
Yeah, no, the bids for, yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, which way? It's 5, it's a short
Yes.
version.
5 corner intersection.
5 corners.
Okay, because it mentions 2 streets. I always refer to it as 5 corners. I just want to make sure.
Because Central and Brandreth are kind of like off the side.
Yeah,
but
okay,
It's
so-
the Main and Spring, so.
So that's
yes.
the 5 corner project. That's how I would love for it to be referred to, but okay. All right,
Mayor, we need to use the formal name for the
Okay.
contract. That's why it appears as it does.
okay. Thank you. We're in the vote, right?
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
It should be
Aye.
like a congratulations, we're getting started, very exciting, woohoo. It's like, I don't know, years in the making at this
Aye.
point. Okay,
Okay. Resolution acknowledging receipt for application for honorary street renaming and referring the application to the village historian. Whereas on or about July 7, 2022, an application was received from Athlema Goodson on behalf of the Dr. George W. Hill Legacy Center seeking the honorary naming of the corner of Main Street and State Street or State Street and Academy Place in memory of Dr. George W. Hill, whereas pursuant to the Village of Austin honorary street naming policy, where the application meets basic criteria including A, the proposed honorary street name, B, contributions to the Village of Austin by the proposed honoree, C, the length of time the proposed honoree resided or continues to reside in the village, D, the name of the existing street to have the honorary street name, E, whether the street already has an honorary street name, F, a map identifying the location of the street to receive the honorary street name, and G, the proposed honoree's connection to the street where the honorary street naming is sought. And whereas the application by the Dr. George W. Hill Legacy Center meets the basic criteria for honorary street naming. Now therefore be it resolved that the application by the Dr. George W. Hill Legacy Center is referred to the village historian in accord with the Village of Austin street naming policy, and that the village historian shall present her report to the Board of Trustees within 45 days of this referral. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Need a second. Okay. Any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. Dr. Hill, I can't think of anybody who deserves a street honorarily named for him. The reason State Street is because his office was in the historic house at 30 State Street, I believe is the number. In fact, it was called Hill House for a long time, and his offices were there, and he lived there with his family. And I think in the 20th century, he was really one of the leading citizens of Ossining. And he was a highly respected African-American doctor, the first, a lot of firsts in that regard, but he was also a great community and civic leader. So I think it's a great idea, and his family lives in the area still, so.
Wait. Looking forward to learning more. These street namings have become, honestly, I don't know, Manny, you've been on the board longer, but I think we've done more street namings this year than we've done in the past maybe decade or two. We've done a lot.
That is correct. That
We
is
did
correct.
have, yeah, and I like them because we learn about people and they're honorary, just so people understand. The we had a discussion, when is enough, when is it too many, when is it too few? My recollection of that meeting was that we said, well, we have a lot of streets and a lot of signs, and when we feel that it's becoming a burden or it's too many or whatever, we'll have to have a discussion. So I just raised this to the board. I personally am not at that point yet. I find this to be such a historical value, personally, that as a person who lives in Ossining, every time I hear these, and then you can look all of this information up, I think as long as there's a historian that's willing to do the research, which does take hours, and there are family members still here, and there is a legitimate reason, I only see an upside to creating a wonderful community. That being said, at some point, if the board feels we need a different process, feel free to bring it to the collective sort of thinking, and we will deal with it unless somebody feels otherwise. But I just
I agree that at some point in the future, we may want to just look at the program and think about it. But I think that this application is highly merited.
Yeah. And you know that I wasn't referring to this particular.
No, I know. But I think it's
At some point.
the more people learn about him, the more eyes will be open to his greatness.
Great. So we look forward, the historian will present, we'll go, we have a process in place, all good. I just wanted to put it out there for those that may wonder a little bit more about it. Okay, I think we're in a vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Resolution authorizing tax share payment for West First Management Corp. 170 North Highland Avenue, whereas tax share proceedings were instituted against the assessor of the town of Ossining, its assessor or board of assessors and board of review by West First Management Corp. Against petitioner's property situated 170 North Highland Avenue in the village of Ossining, designated as section 89.15 block 1 lot 14.1 in the village of Ossining for the 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 assessment years under index number 6180-2016, 66818-2017, 66013-2018, 66255/2019, 61855/2020, and 64363-2021. And whereas the Village of Austining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Austining assessment rule for the Village of Austining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Austining for all subsequent years. And whereas on June 9, 2022, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner West First Management Corp. Against the Village of Austining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and the improvements situated therein as set forth in Schedule A Annex Tier 2. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining, upon certification by the village treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make the payment of such refund of real property taxes due to West First Management Corp. To Joseph E. ST Onji SQ and as attorney and agent for the West First Management Corp. as required by said consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payment so the village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer should make a notation in the margin of the assessment rules of the Village of Austining and the said assessments were reduced and payment of a refund to the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution authorizing tax share payment for Highland Terrace Owners Corp. 123 to 125 South Highland Avenue, whereas tax share proceedings were instituted against the assessor of the Town of Austining. Excuse me, the Board of Review of the Town of Austining and the Town of Austining by Highland Terrace Owners Corp. Against petitioner's property situated at 123 to 125 South Highland Avenue, the Village of Austining, and designated as Section 97.11, Block 4, Lot 32 in the Village of Austining for the 2016 to 2021 assessment years under index number 64743/2016, 66130-2017, 66054-2018, 65589-2019, 61492/2020, and 63588-2021. And whereas the Village of Austining ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the Town of Austining assessment rule for the Village of Austining as prepared by the assessor of the Town of Austining for all subsequent years. And whereas on June 6, 2022, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner Highland Terrace Owners Corp. Against the Village of Austining, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of aforesaid real property and the improvements situated thereon as set forth in Schedule A Annex 2. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining, upon certification by the village treasurer that all the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make the payment of such refund of real property taxes due to Highland Terrace Owners Corp. To Griffin, Cogan, Solson, Horgan, PC as attorneys and agents for Highland Terrace Owners Corp. As required by said consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payment so the village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be further resolved that the village treasurer shall make a notation in the margin of the assessment rules of the Village of Austining, the said assessment to reduce the payment of a refund of the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Yes. I just have a question, not a comment. This dealt in regards to the tax treasury portion of our budget. There's obviously big two numbers on tonight's agenda, sure. One is 39, the other one is 37,000. What are we looking at on our budget so far?
Good evening. Thank you, Trustee Casada. Currently, we had budgeted 103,000 for the expense side of these refunds. Anything that's for the 2022 current year refund actually goes against our tax revenue account. So that really doesn't come into play with the expenditure side, which is the 2021 year and anything prior to 2021. Currently, actually, there's another 3 tax certs that we were served that Stuart will be bringing forward at the next work session to discuss. With those 3 additional tax certs served, we will be almost at or a little bit over 100,000 for our expenditure line. So we will hopefully not get served anymore this year.
Let's hope. Let's hope. And obviously, some of the stuff, it comes from, if you look at the information in our agenda, it's not 2021. It actually, some of them is 2016. So it kind of goes back a couple of years back as well. So just to have an idea, it adds up depending how many years they have looked back. So
That
thank you.
is correct. Yes.
Thank you, Dale. I appreciate that.
Okay, Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Resolution authorizing tax share payment for Scarborough Manor Owners Corp. 16 Rockledge Avenue. Whereas tax share proceedings were instituted against the assessor of the town of Austin, the Board of Assessment Review of the town of Austin, and the town of Austin by Scarborough Manor Owners Corp. Against petitioner's property situated at 16 Rockledge Avenue in the village of Austin and designated as section 97.15 block 1 lot 37 in the village of Austin for the 2020 and 2021 assessment years under index numbers 61497-2020 and 63593-2021. And whereas the village of Austin ceased being a tax assessing unit in 1989 and now adopts the town of Austin assessment roll for the village of Austin as prepared by the assessor of the town of Austin for all subsequent years. And whereas on June 6, 2022, a consent judgment was entered in favor of the petitioner Scarborough Manor Owners Corp. Against the village of Austin, correcting, fixing, and reducing the assessed valuations of the aforesaid real property and the improvements situated thereon as set forth in Schedule A Annex Here 2. And resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin, upon certification by the village treasurer that all of the aforesaid taxes have been paid, hereby authorizes and directs the village treasurer to make the payments of such refund of real properties taxes due to Scarborough Manor Owners Corp. To Griffin Coogan, Solson, Horgan, PC as attorneys and agents for the Scarborough Manor Owners Corp. As required by said consent judgment, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer is authorized to make the aforesaid payments so the village may avoid the payment of any penalties, and be it further resolved that the village treasurer should make a notation in the margin of the assessment rolls of the village of Austin, the said assessment was reduced and payment of a refund of the overpayment of real property taxes was made pursuant to said judgment. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Nope. Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay. Call for public hearing, proposed local law 9/2022 titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 250 Vehicles and Traffic of the Village of Austin Code. Is on the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby calls for a public hearing to take place at 7:30 p.m. on August 3rd, 2022 to consider proposed local law 9/2022 titled A Local Law Amending Chapter 250 Vehicles and Traffic of the Village of Austin Code, and be further resolved as a result of the continuing state of emergency contained in Executive Orders 11 through 11.8 and the associated suspensions and modifications of law, including the opening meetings law. The public hearing will be conducted remotely via the Zoom platform, and be it further resolved that for those individuals who want to watch and or participate in the public hearing remotely, the following contact information is provided. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Records Management System for OPD Letter of Support to Westchester County, whereas the Austin Police Department is required to operate and maintain a Records Management System, RMS, to log and chronicle department activity. And whereas Austin Police Department leadership has diligently worked with neighboring municipalities throughout Westchester County, including the county itself, to introduce an RMS system that can allow interagency communication as well as economies of scale on software and hardware costs. And whereas the Westchester County Board of Legislators has dedicated funding for 15 participating communities, including Austin, to participate in the Hexagon RMS system, inclusive of startup costs for each agency, including interfaces to RICI, TRACS, eJustice, and CIC, and each agency's legacy databases and support and maintenance for years 2 to 5. And whereas any and all additional costs pertaining to the transition costs were borne by individual communities as needed. Therefore, be it resolved that the Village of Austin Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the Chief of Police to send confirmation of participation in the Hexagon RMS Consortium Program to the Westchester County Department of Public Safety, accompanied by a certified copy of this resolution. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Just give me 1 second, I have to take a drink. This
You're
is a
doing
lot.
great.
This is a
We
lot.
got the whole alphabet soup here today.
Maintenance and retention of electronic records, whereas our resolution dated September 2nd, 2020, the Board of Trustees adopted the retention and disposition schedule for local government records, LGS1, issued pursuant to Article 57-A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law, containing legal minimum retention periods for local government records. And whereas pursuant to Article 57-A, only those records will be disposed of that are described in retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records, LGS1, after the records have met the minimum retention period described in the schedule. And only those records will be disposed of that do not have sufficient administrative, fiscal, legal, or historical value to merit retention beyond established legal minimum periods. And whereas pursuant Arts and Cultural Affairs Law, Section 57.19, each local government shall have one officer who is designated as Records Management Officer. In villages, the village clerk shall be the Records Management Officer. And whereas the Commissioner of Education for New York State promulgated regulations in Part 185 regarding records of public corporations. And whereas 8988 NYCRR 185.2C notes, the Records Management Officer should initiate, coordinate, and promote the systematic management of the local government records in consultation and cooperation with other local offices. And whereas 8 NYCRR 185.7F provides digital images of public records may be stored on electronic media, and such electronic records may replace paper originals or micrographic copies of those records. In order to ensure accessibility and intelligibility with the life of those records, local governments must follow the procedures described in Section 185.8 of the part. And whereas 89 YCRR 185.8 retention and preservation of electronic records provides in Part A, a local government should ensure the records retention requirements are incorporated into any plan and process for design, redesign, and substantial enhancement of any information system that stores electronic records. B, a local government shall ensure that electronic records are not rendered unusable because of changing technology before the retention and preservation requirements are met. C, a local government shall develop and maintain up-to-date documentation about all permanent and archival electronic records. D, a local government shall prepare and store in a secure offsite facility copies of archival electronic records in order to safeguard against loss. And E, and local government should institute specific maintenance procedures for electronic media containing permanent or archival electronic records. Whereas to the extent possible, the Village of Austin is a series of utilizing electronic and or digital records in place of paper records or micrographic copies. Now therefore be resolved. The Village of Austin shall maintain all digitally created records in native digital format for the retention period set out in the most recent edition of the retention disposition schedule for New York local government records LGS-1, and be it further resolved that the village shall retain and preserve its electronic records defined as those records stored on electronic media that can be read or processed only by means of a computer in accordance with the requirements of 8 NYCRR 185.8 of the regulations of Commissioner of Education. And be further resolved that the village clerk as a records management officer in consultation with other local officers, including but not limited to elected officials, village manager, assistant village manager, corporation counsel, treasurer, police chief, chief of engineering of the Austin Volunteer Fire Department, village engineer, and other department heads or designees shall determine which non-electronic copies of records for which there are corresponding electronic copies may be disposed of when such non-electronic copies are no longer needed for reference, historical, or other administrative purposes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I moved room, sorry. I asked if there were any comments. Okay, so Stuart, I get the picture. The question is, why do we need legislation to basically say that everything should be digitalized?
The state has requested that there be resolutions.
And does that mean that the village for now and going forward is committed to always buying the best and fastest and whatever, have contract with vendors that in some cases may be beyond our financial capacity? Because we're passing legislation now that says we will move everything to a system. We will always have it done that way. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm just
Mayor, I
trying to
am
make sure.
advised by the clerk that the requirements that the state currently has are all in place by the village and in the village clerk's office.
So
Those
we're
processes, we are already in this direction. This is basically so that we do not have to maintain as many of the paper copies as we do. We can use far more of the digital.
Great. Yeah, I was just aside from the fact that I enjoy watching Martha speed read through paragraph after paragraph, I didn't understand why you would need legislation for something that's operational to begin with. Okay, I think we've got the answer to that. Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? No. Okay. Authorizing the village manager to issue a request for proposals for design and construction administration services associated with the rehabilitation of the 1.5 mg Lakeville water storage tank. Resolved that upon review by the Corporation Council, the village manager is authorized to issue a request for proposals, designs, and construction administration services associated with the rehabilitation of the 1.5 mg Lakeville water storage tank. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
Comments? I'll only say that this is a very long agenda covering many, many things. But I'll only say if anybody's interested in the agenda, we discussed this at length last week. So Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining authorizing submission of application for Empire State Development Grant Funds for renovations to Joseph J. Caputo Community Center. Whereas the village desires to perform renovations to the Joseph G. Caputo Community Center for the benefit of recreational programming and activities for Austining residents of all ages. And whereas the Empire State Development Grant Funds Program has identified as appropriate to fund such project. And whereas 20% of a project's total cost is eligible with a 10% required cash equity match. Whereas cost estimates to retain perform the requisite work have been obtained in the amount of $5,941,000. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for an Empire State Development Grant in an amount not to exceed $891,150, representing 15% of the project's costs. And upon the funding of said amount commits to providing $2,549,850 in matching funds, the remainder of which will be funded by the Downtown Redevelopment Initiative DRI grant program. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any comments? I'm actually finishing to read this, so give me a second. Okay. Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining authorizing submission of the application for Empire State Development Grant Funds for construction of a multimodal transportation hub in Austining. Whereas the village desires to construct a multimodal transportation hub in downtown Austining, which will offset parking needs while also building infrastructure for electric vehicles and e-bikes for transportation and recreational use throughout the village. And whereas the Empire State Development Grant Funds Program has been identified as appropriate to fund such product, and whereas 20% of a project's total cost is eligible with a 10% required cash equity match. Whereas cost estimates to retain perform the requisite work have been obtained in the amount of $11,720,000. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for a Empire State Development Grant in an amount not to exceed $1,758,000, representing 50% of the project cost, and upon the funding of said amount commits to providing $6,962,000 in matching funds, the remainder of which will be funded by the DRI grant program. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Need a second.
Second.
Comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining authorizing submission of application for Empire State Development Grant Funds for expanding and enhancing Market Square's public plaza. Whereas the village desires to expand and enhance the Market Square Plaza at Main and Spring Streets in an effort to create a community space that can host various and diverse programming and events. And whereas the Empire State Development Grant Funds Program has been identified as appropriate to fund such product, and whereas 20% of a project's total cost is eligible with a 10% required cash equity match, and whereas cost estimates to retain perform the requisite work have been obtained in the amount of $3,490,000. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for an Empire State Development Grant and an amount not to exceed $523,500, representing 15% of the project cost, and upon the funding of said amount commits to providing $966,500 in matching funds, the remainder of which will be funded by the DRI grant program. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments? Man, these things are really moving right along, huh? We went, sort of exciting.
Mayor, let me just
And
make, Mayor, may I make just one point with all of these resolutions? That would be resolutions L, M, N, and O, which is to be read, which has just been read.
Good.
They are all also dependent upon obviously getting the funding for the particular projects from, for the DRI. So
Yeah.
that's has to be understood. I want both the
Yeah,
board and
no,
the
I
public to
appreciate you
understand.
bringing it to our attention, Stuart. And that's what I meant by we're running right through it, because this is all the stuff we've worked on, not all, most of the
Right.
stuff with the DRI. And now we're passing legislation that basically says we'll do X, Y, and Z if A, B, and C fall into place. Project by project by project. So that's what I meant by, wow, we're like flying now. This is happening. It's very exciting.
Correct.
Maybe I'm the only one that's excited, but that's okay.
It's very exciting. It's because the DRI numbers are proposed numbers right now. It could be that they're funded, but not necessarily to the amounts listed here too. So it's just, it's the way it's worded, Stuart. I don't know if that's,
No, I think, village manager, we're okay because it's basically, the funding is in large part dependent upon the downtown,
Right.
what comes from the DRI. So,
Now,
and this is just to file the application for. So
Right,
it's
exactly.
that's essentially what you're doing at this point.
also,
exactly.
just to Stuart Kahan's point, for anybody watching this, who will watch it in reruns. The other thing to remember is the state still has not, and it's not expected to give us a final rundown. There might be a project that we're discussing right now that may be not happening. There may be a bunch of projects that have less money with them, so we'll see, but this is like,
Okay,
these are the steps. I think this seems okay to me, so.
yeah. Just to make
Okay.
sure that it's understood that there could be some fluctuations in those
Sure.
numbers.
Okay, Martha, I think we're gonna vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin authorizing submission of application for the Department of State's Local Waterfront Revitalization Program, LWRP, for amendments to the Village of Austin LWRP, whereas the village desires contract with a consulting firm to update the current LWRP, which was last amended in 2011, and may no longer accurately reflect the community's vision for the Austin waterfront. And whereas the local waterfront revitalization program under the Department of State has been identified as appropriate to fund such projects. And whereas 85% of a product's total cost is eligible for communities in an environmental justice area. And whereas cost estimates to retain perform the requisite work have been obtained in the amount of $125,000. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village manager to file an application for a local waterfront revitalization program grant in an amount not to exceed $106,250, and upon the funding listed amount commits to providing $18,750 in matching funds. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Comments?
I just want, if maybe Karen or Stuart can actually kind of explain exactly what this means for the waterfront portion of it, please.
So last week we talked about the our local waterfront revitalization plan that we do have. This is planning dollars to update that plan. And that would be able to have us further incorporate some of the things that we've been learning about flood mitigation, things like that of that nature. So the planning enables, does pave the way, as with most of these grants. The planning grant is the first stage to be able to then acquire money for capital improvements and other improvements that would be needed based on the plan findings. So this is really an update, the same way we updated the comprehensive plan. It's an update to the local waterfront revitalization plan.
Thank you. So when you said upgrade, could you give me an example of what this look like? And I'm assuming we're going to be hiring a consultant to do this at some point.
Yes, it's really the comprehensive plan equivalent for the waterfront.
Okay.
So we have it and it's periodically updated. This one is in need of update as well. So it would be the same. Basically, you'd work with a planning firm that specializes in this and be able to update the plan, and it would incorporate the changes that we've seen over the last several years. I think the most significant ones are the changes that we discovered through the Cornell Adaptive Design Studio based on the floodplain and anticipated changes to the waterfront over the next several decades.
So this is pretty much, and just for the public to understand, this is, it will change some requirements for new development in that area. It will change what we are looking for to have done in there. It's not that we are going to be building something. It's not, it has nothing to do with that.
No, it really doesn't. So, a lot of the development plans that we put in place, are, during the comprehensive planning process, we looked at this area in terms of development. This would focus on also, shoreline adaptive design, some of the things that we're looking at now. It could even include dock extensions, things like that around the waterfront that right now are not accommodated in our current plan.
Again, this is just a study.
Yes.
It's just for a study.
Right. It just is updating our current plan and bringing
Could
that.
you refresh my memory? When was the last time we did this?
I think it is, I'm sorry. I believe it is close to, it's over 10 years.
2011.
Okay. That's
Thank
right.
you.
It's just 10 years.
Okay.
Thank
Does
you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Any zoning changes or looking at zoning at all?
It possible, but really, the waterfront it could, but I think some of the, that's possible, but it is really focused on waterfront revitalization. So it could
That
be
could be-
looking at zoning. So
Most likely
yes.
that's a different study, Dana.
It could be incorporated, but I think the study that you're referring to probably is not going to address that necessarily.
Correct. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Stuart.
Okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Village of Austin Board of Trustees expression of a support for payment in lieu of tax pilot agreement, including mortgage recordings and sale tax exemptions between the Westchester County Industrial Development Agency and WB 30 Water Street LLC for the property located at 30 Water Street. Whereas the Village of Austin is the owner of certain premises together with the improvements thereon constructed consisting of the former Village Department of Public Works site located at Main Street, Water Street, and Central Avenue 30 Water Street project site, which premises comprise approximately 3.2 acres and includes the following 5 tax parcels: SBL 89.19-6/2022, SBL 89.19-6/26, SBL 89.19-6/27, SBL 89.19-6/28, and SBL 89.19-6/29. And whereas the village has determined that the project site is no longer needed for municipal purposes, and whereas in July 2019, the village issued a request for qualifications RFQ for site concepts and developer qualifications for the project site. And whereas the RFQ's guiding principles highlighted the village's goal in furtherance of the village's 2017 housing needs assessment for redevelopment of the project site to provide a deeper and broader level of affordability requirements for new housing developments to ensure access to affordable housing by lower income households, and that support mixed income housing. And whereas the RFQ further underscored the village's goal of, among other things, providing links between the downtown and waterfront areas of the village, including pedestrian connections between Upper Main Street and Station Plaza, public access along the Sing Sing Kill, and connection to the Sing Sing Kill Greenway. And whereas on June 17, 2020, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution authorizing the village manager to enter into an agreement with Wilder-Walter Partners Incorporated as a preferred developer for the project site. And whereas on February 2nd, 2022, the Board of Trustees adopted a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a land acquisition and development agreement LADA with WBP Development LLC, and such terms are acceptable to the Board of Trustees. And whereas on February 9, 2022, the village manager and William G. Bolter on behalf of WB Development LLC executed the LADA. And whereas the LADA identified the development to be constructed in accordance with the site plan project as the following: Mixed-use residential rental apartment building consisting of not more than 109 units, 108 rental units plus 1 superintendent unit with approximately 2,000 to 3,000 square feet of ground floor amenity space. The residential units will comply with the affordable rental housing requirement defined in the LADA as residential units, which for a period of not less than 99 years shall be restricted to occupancy by households whose income is between 30% and 80% of the Westchester County area median income under the current income averaging set aside option as determined by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Notwithstanding the foregoing, an average units will be affordable to households whose income is at or below 60% of the Westchester County area median income, with rents averaging no more than 60% of the Westchester County area median income. Rentable retail space to be used by building residents and the public, approximately 3,720 square feet of community space to be controlled by the village and utilized in connection with the village's community center to encourage community development and opportunities for community programming. A 4-level detached parking garage containing approximately 150 to 200 parking spaces. The first 3 levels will be for residents of the units only. The 4th level will provide a minimum of 45 parking spaces for use by village residents. The 4th level will have a solar canopy. A new sidewalk and linear park to run between the building and parking garage, which will be the termination point of the Greenway extension. An extension of the Sing Sing Hill Greenway from its current termination point on the north side of Central Avenue through the Central Avenue Arch and extending throughout the project site to Water Street. Remediation of the project site pursuant to the Brownfield Cleanup Agreement, stormwater facilities to improve current conditions, including improvements to the walls of the Sing Sing Hill and stormwater dissipation measures as approved by the village engineer. And whereas section 2.10 of the LADA provides the parties agree to cooperate fully to obtain financial assistance for the project from the IDA Westchester County Industrial Development Agency, consisting from abandonment of real property taxes pursuant to payment in lieu of tax agreement between the IDA and the developer unapproved by the village, pilot agreement, and mortgage recording and sales and use tax exemptions. The pilot agreement shall be for a term of not more than 30 years from conversion of the recognized mortgage from construction financing to a permanent mortgage. And whereas the proposed pilot schedule is annexed to the LADA as Exhibit J and that the same schedule is annexed to this resolution as Exhibit A. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin supports the efforts of and will cooperate fully with WB30 Water Street LLC's intention to obtain financial assistance for the above described project from the Westchester County Industrial Development Agency for an abandonment of real property taxes pursuant to a pilot agreement in accord with the schedule annexed to this resolution is Exhibit A and mortgage recording and sales and use tax exemptions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? Everybody okay? All righty. Very succinctly written, by the way, Stuart. Thank you. Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
You got it? 4-1.
Yeah, and I just want to briefly say just a quick comment on this, just to kind of clarify my vote. I'm here. I'm not opposed to the project. I'm in favor of the project. I think the project is an exemplary of what we have been working so hard to accomplish in our village. What I'm opposed is, as the resolution said, is for the pilot that is not to exceed 30 years. That's the part that I'm opposed to. I've been supporter of the project and all the other resolutions. I don't feel comfortable with having a 30-year pilot on this particular project. So I just want to have a clear explanation and the reason why I'm opposing for this part of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Quesada. There was a lot of conversation when we started down this journey. Past board and majority of this board is, I don't even know if it's a majority, but enough of us oppose pilots for market rate and even for this. There have been a lot of changes, some pluses, some minuses in the project. So I appreciate you bringing that forth because it is important to note that a no vote does not mean it's about the project. The no vote is very specific to the resolution that the board is voting on tonight. There will be other resolutions regarding this project. So I appreciate that. And I just want to underscore the Deputy Mayor's strong stance on this. Appreciate the input.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, is there any continuing business of the board?
I think we have to vote. Oh, we voted and then you commented. Is that right? Sorry. Thank you. Martha, I'm sorry, continuing business.
No continuing business? Okay. Is there new business to the
Hands.
board?
Okay, Martha, slow down for a minute. There are 4 people. Let me just make sure everybody has a chance. Continue, if there's any continuing business, this is the time to speak up. Or raise your hand. Okay, Martha,
Is there new business to the board?
anybody have any new business? Okay, so I have a question that has come up. Maybe it's the heat, I'm not quite sure why. Under new business, no big deal, but are we still doing like taxi vouchers? Does anybody know, for people in Ossining? Like, we used to do that for seniors. They used to pay, pick up vouchers at the community center. It was like $2 or $3. We would subsidize some of that.
Coupons.
I have a lot of blank stares on the gallery. Does
It's a
anybody
town-
know?
It's a town program.
Yeah, it's a town program and it is still in effect, I believe. I haven't heard anything to the contrary.
It is.
Okay.
I heard from the town supervisor recently about it, and so folks could go to the town clerk to get those.
All right, so if you live in the village, can you participate in the program? Because
Yes.
if you live in the village, you live in the town. So
Yes.
if you live in the town, you could also do it. And if you live outside the town, can you also participate? Or should I not be asking this group, but rather ask the clerk?
I would clarify with the town supervisor, but anyone that's part of the town of Ossining, which includes the village, the town
Great.
outside, and Briar Cliff
Great.
would qualify.
Yeah,
And I
it's
see
it's a
Gail
it's a
is saying
town
yes.
project.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great project. I didn't know COVID.
Program,
I
rather.
didn't- So that's great. Very proud to have that project. I will follow up myself. You don't have to take any actions. I appreciate it. I do not, oh, I'm sorry. What else, Martha?
Yes, I was gonna say that, yes, it is running. If you have any questions, you can call the clerk Sue Donnelly and she can answer any other questions. But yes, it is running, and the senior programs, unlike other years, there's not a specific company, like specific taxi company for the seniors. All the taxi companies that have been licensed through the clerk's office have to give the seniors with vouchers their rides. That is something that was made clear for this year.
Great, that's lovely. Thank you. My parents used to use that a lot. It was really wonderful. So I'm glad we live in a community that still supports that. Do we have exec session? I'm told that we really don't.
Not tonight, Mayor.
So we have nothing after this.
Nope.
Okay, wow, look at us. Okay, folks, so I guess, ladies and gentlemen, 9:32, putting my
Wait,
glasses on.
there's
What
still
happened?
we're still
There's
missing
one more thing?
There's one more
Martha,
thing,
come on.
yeah. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to
Oh,
address the
geez, I'm
board
sorry.
on any, not relating to the agenda, but a relevance to the common good of the village? If so, please click on your virtual hand.
Thank you, Martha. I apologize for that.
There's nobody in the gallery that is raising their hand.
So now can I have a second and a motion, no, motion and a
A
second
motion and a
to
second.
adjourn the meeting, please?
So move.
Need a second.
Second.
All in favor? I'll do it.
Aye.
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, 9:33 on the 20th of July, and we are adjourned for the evening. We will see everybody next week. Same time, same place.